Violet stood in front of the mirror, her fingers raw and bleeding from clawing at the seams. The costume had been on for 3 days now. 3 days since Halloween night. 3 days since she'd laughed it off as a joke. This vintage clown outfit she found at that strange pop-up shop on Elm Street. But the laughter died when she realized the truth. The fabric had fused with her skin. Every attempt to remove it sent waves of agony through her body. And worse, she was starting to forget who she wore underneath. The face paint wouldn't wash off. The smile kept growing wider. And tonight, when she looked in the mirror, someone else looked back. Before we continue with this terrifying tale, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below with your favorite horror topic. We read every single one and your suggestion might be our next story. October 29th, 2 days before Halloween. Violet Chen walked down Elm Street with her phone pressed to her ear, barely listening to her mother's concerns about spending the holiday alone. The breakup with Daniel was still fresh, only 3 weeks old, and everyone seemed determined to remind her of it. "Mom, I'm fine. I'll just hand out candy and watch movies. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. Last Halloween, she and Daniel had won the couple's costume contest at the Riverside party. This year, she'd be lucky if she could even look at pumpkins without feeling that hollow ache in her chest. She ended the call and shoved her phone into her jacket pocket, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp autumn air. That's when she noticed it, a shop that definitely wasn't there yesterday, or any day before that. The storefront was narrow, wedged between the hardware store and the abandoned bakery like it had always belonged there. Dark purple curtains hung in the windows, and a hand-painted sign swayed gently above the door. "Madame Esther's Costume Emporium, where you become someone else." Violet stopped. The windows were cluttered with masks, vintage hats, and elaborate outfits that looked like they belonged in a museum, not a pop-up Halloween shop. Something about the place pulled at her, a magnetic curiosity she couldn't quite explain. She checked her watch. She had time before her afternoon client meeting. Just a quick look. The door chime was a series of bells that sounded uncomfortably like laughter. Inside, the shop was larger than it had any right to be, stretching back into shadows that the flickering Edison bulbs couldn't quite reach. The air smelled of mothballs, old fabric, and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. "Welcome, welcome." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Violet turned to find a woman emerging from behind a velvet curtain. She was ancient, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and unnaturally green. She wore layers of shawls and scarves, her fingers heavy with silver rings. "I've been expecting you, Violet." Violet's skin prickled. "How do you know my name?" Madame Esther smiled, revealing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "I know everyone who walks through my door. It's my gift. You're looking for something, aren't you? Something to make you forget." "I'm just browsing." "Of course you are." The old woman glided past her, moving with surprising grace despite her apparent age. "But you're here because you want to be someone else, even if just for one night. The girl who got left behind wants to disappear." Violet should have walked out. Every rational part of her brain screamed to leave this creepy shop and its even creepier owner. But the words hit too close to home, and before she knew it, she was following Madame Esther deeper into the store. They passed racks of elaborate costumes, Victorian gowns, military uniforms, animal suits, superhero outfits, each one seemingly crafted with obsessive detail. But the old woman didn't stop at any of them. She led Violet to the very back, where a single costume hung on a mannequin in a small alcove, spotlit by a single bulb. It was a clown costume, but not the cheap party store kind. This was vintage, maybe from the 1920s or 30s. The fabric was a rich burgundy and black, with intricate silver threading that formed swirling patterns across the chest and sleeves. The collar was elaborate ruffles of black lace. White gloves, pristine and delicate, hung beside it. And the mask, half-painted porcelain covering just the upper face, was a work of art, with a frozen smile and hollow eyes. "The Pierrot," Madame Esther whispered. "A sad clown. A performer who hides their broken heart behind painted smiles. It's perfect for you. Violet reached out, her fingers grazing the fabric. It was impossibly soft, almost warm to the touch. How much? For you? Free. Consider it a gift for your pain. Nothing's free. The old woman's smile widened. Very perceptive. You're right, of course. There's always a price. But you won't pay it tonight. Warning bells should have been deafening in Violet's mind, but she was transfixed. The costume was stunning, unique, exactly the kind of thing that would make people forget she was the pathetic girl who got dumped right before the holidays. She could be mysterious, artistic, tragic in a beautiful way instead of a pitiful one. I'll take it. Wonderful. Madame Esther lifted the costume from the mannequin with reverent care, folding it into an ornate black box lined with red silk. A word of advice, dear. Once you put it on, you must wear it until midnight, not a moment less. The costume requires commitment. It needs to know you're serious about the transformation. That's oddly specific. Old traditions, my dear. Respect them, and you'll have a magical Halloween. Disrespect them. She shrugged, leaving the sentence hanging in the air like a noose. Violet took the box, surprised by its weight. What happens if I take it off early? Madame Esther's green eyes glittered in the dim light. Let's hope you never find out. Outside, the autumn sun seemed too bright, too normal. Violet stood on the sidewalk, the black box in her arms, trying to process what just happened. She turned back to look at the shop, but in the daylight it looked less mysterious and more shabby. Just another struggling business trying to make rent. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, where are you? Thought we were getting coffee? Sorry, I'm on Elm Street. Got distracted by this costume shop. What costume shop? There's nothing but that old bakery and the hardware store on Elm. Violet turned to look at the storefront again, but Marcus was still talking. Listen, forget the costume stuff. Come to my place tonight. I'm having people over for a pre-Halloween thing. You need to get out of your apartment. Maybe, Violet said, clutching the box tighter. I'll let you know. But she already knew she wouldn't go. She had other plans now. She had a transformation to make. Halloween night arrived with unseasonable warmth. Violet's apartment felt stuffy as she laid out the costume on her bed, the fabric seeming to shimmer under her bedroom lights. She'd ignored 3 calls from Marcus and a dozen texts asking her to reconsider his party. She didn't want company. She wanted transformation. The costume slid on like a second skin. The moment the fabric touched her body, Violet felt a strange tingling sensation spreading across her flesh. The fit was perfect. Too perfect, as if the costume had been sewn specifically for her measurements. The gloves were last, and as she pulled them on, she felt a subtle click, like pieces of a puzzle locking into place. The mask came next. The porcelain was cool against her face, the elastic band settling into her hair. She applied the white face paint to her lower face, carefully drawing the exaggerated sad smile that completed the Pierrot look. Red circles on her cheeks, black tears trailing down from beneath the mask. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself. The transformation was complete. She felt powerful, mysterious, like she'd stepped out of her ordinary life and into something more. For the first time in weeks, she didn't think about Daniel. She didn't think about the future she'd lost or the loneliness that had been eating her alive. The doorbell rang. Trick-or-treaters. Violet answered the door again and again, handing out candy, watching children's eyes widen at her costume. Some parents complimented her commitment. Others looked uncomfortable, pulling their kids a little closer. "Cool costume, lady," one teenager said. "You going to a party or something?" "Something," Violet replied, her voice sounding strange in her own ears. Lower, raspier, not quite hers. By 9 o'clock, the trick-or-treaters had trickled to nothing. Violet poured herself a glass of wine and collapsed on the couch, suddenly exhausted. The costume felt heavier now, constricting. She checked her phone. 9:47 p.m. Just over 2 hours until midnight. Then she could take it off and go to bed. Except when she tried to remove the gloves, they wouldn't budge. Panic fluttered in Violet's chest. She pulled harder at the glove on her right hand, but it was like trying to peel off her own skin. The fabric wouldn't separate from her flesh. She ran to the bathroom, turning on the light, examining her hands under the harsh fluorescent glow. The seam where the glove ended and her wrist began had disappeared. There was no line, no edge, just smooth white fabric that somehow merged perfectly with her skin. Okay, it's just stuck. Maybe some soap will help. She ran her hands under hot water, pumping soap onto them, scrubbing desperately. But nothing changed. If anything, the water seemed to make the fabric bond tighter. She tried to pull at the costume's collar to yank the whole thing over her head, but searing pain shot through her body, driving her to her knees. It felt like she was trying to rip off her own flesh. What the hell? What the hell? She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, or tried to. The gloves made her fingers clumsy, and she dropped it twice before finally managing to pull up Marcus's number. Vi, you okay? You sound weird. Marcus, I need you to come over now. Something's wrong with this costume. I can't get it off. What? Just pull harder. You don't understand. It won't come off. It's stuck to my skin. I think that shop owner did something to it. There was a pause. What shop? Vi, you're freaking me out. The costume shop on Elm Street. Madame Esther's. I got this costume there, and now there is no costume shop on Elm Street. I told you that yesterday. Violet caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and froze. The face paint shouldn't have looked wet anymore, but it did. It was moving, slowly spreading across the white porcelain mask, filling in the eye holes. And beneath it, she could swear she saw someone else's eyes staring back at her. I'm coming over, Marcus said. Don't do anything crazy. I'll be there in 15 minutes. But Violet barely heard him. She was transfixed by her reflection, watching as the sad painted smile on her face began to widen, stretching beyond what she'd drawn, creeping up toward her ears. She wasn't controlling it. The smile was moving on its own. By the time Marcus arrived pounding on her door, Violet was sitting on her living room floor, surrounded by kitchen knives, scissors, and a lighter. She'd tried everything. Cutting the fabric only dulled the blades. The lighter wouldn't catch. The costume seemed fireproof. Even when she'd held the flame directly to the sleeve, she'd only succeeded in burning her own arm, the pain excruciating as blisters formed beneath the cursed fabric. Violet, open up. She stumbled to the door, unlocking it with numb fingers. Marcus took one look at her and his face went pale. Jesus Christ. What happened to you? The costume. It won't come off. Marcus, I'm scared. It's changing me. I can feel it. He stepped inside, circling her slowly, examining the costume with growing horror. This is insane. We need to get you to a hospital. They can cut it off. I tried cutting it. It won't work. Marcus pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. That shop you mentioned, I'm searching for it. There's nothing. No business license, no website, no social media. It's like it never existed. But it did exist. I was there. I spoke to her. She gave me this costume and she said... Violet stopped, the memory suddenly crystal clear. She said there's always a price, and that I wouldn't pay it tonight. What does that mean? Before Violet could answer, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. She picked it up and a text message appeared. 3 days. That's how long you have. The costume needs what you promised, a transformation. Give yourself to it willingly and you'll live. Fight it and you'll become nothing but an empty shell, another costume in my collection. Choose wisely, Violet. Time is running out. Marcus read over her shoulder. We're going to that address, Elm Street. We're going to find this woman and make her fix this. But Violet could already feel it. The costume tightening around her ribs, constricting her breathing. The smile on her face stretching wider. In the window's reflection, she saw herself begin to laugh, though she wasn't making any sound. The transformation had begun, and she had 3 days to stop it, or surrender to it completely. They found the shop the next morning, or what remained of it. The storefront on Elm Street stood empty, windows dark and dusty like it had been abandoned for years. When Marcus forced the door open, they discovered nothing but bare walls and cobwebs. No costumes, no Madame Esther. No evidence anyone had been there in decades. But in the corner, beneath layers of dust, Violet found something that made her blood run cold. A stack of old photographs. Black and white images of people wearing the same costume she had on. Different eras, different faces, but the same burgundy and black Pierrot outfit. And in every photo, the person's expression was identical. That stretched, impossible smile. On the back of each photo, a single word was written in faded ink: transformed. Violet spent the next 2 days researching obsessively. She discovered the truth about Madame Esther, a costume maker from the 1890s who'd been accused of witchcraft, of creating cursed garments that stole people's identities. She'd vanished before her trial, but the legends persisted. The costume was her masterpiece, designed to consume whoever wore it, feeding on their desire to escape themselves. On the third night, as midnight approached, Violet made her choice. She sat in front of her mirror, the costume now completely fused with her body, her face barely visible beneath the spreading face paint. Marcus begged her to keep fighting, but she knew the truth. There was no removing the costume. There was only acceptance or annihilation. She closed her eyes and thought about who she really was. Not the girl who got dumped, not the person trying to escape her pain, just Violet, flawed, hurt, but real. But when she opened her eyes, she spoke directly to the costume, to whatever dark consciousness lived within it. You can't have me. I'm not trying to be someone else anymore. I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. The fabric began to crack like old porcelain. The face paint peeled away in strips. The gloves split at the seams, and as the clock struck midnight on November 3rd, the costume fell away from her body in pieces, disintegrating into ash that smelled of smoke and old flowers. Violet collapsed, naked and trembling, but free. Marcus wrapped her in a blanket, holding her as she sobbed. The costume was gone, leaving only faint silver scars on her wrists where the gloves had been, a permanent reminder of how close she'd come to losing herself entirely. The next Halloween, Violet wore jeans and a sweater and handed out candy with Marcus at his place. No costume, no transformation, just her, exactly as she was. And that was enough. But sometimes late at night she'd catch her reflection in the mirror and swear she could see the faint outline of that painted smile ghosting across her face. A reminder that some things once worn never fully let you go. That's the story of the costume that wouldn't come off. Makes you think twice about what you're willing to wear, doesn't it? The masks we put on, the identities we try on for size, sometimes they fit a little too well and we forget who we were underneath. If this story got under your skin, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more dark tales coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows of our next video. Drop a comment below and tell me, what horror topic should we explore next? Urban legends? Cursed objects? Haunted places? I'm listening, and your idea might just become our next nightmare. Until then, stay safe out there. And remember, not every costume is meant to be worn. Some of them are meant to wear you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the dark.